This week on Dance of Joy, we talk about George Michael moods, dancing in the dark, and what happened to galoshes. All that and more as we watch Season 4, Episode 10 of our favorite 80s hit sitcom, Perfect Strangers. Hello, listener, and welcome to Dance of Joy, a Perfect Strangers rewatch podcast. My name is Imran. I'm one of your hosts. Joining me every week, my sister, Sophia. Hello.
Hello. Hello. I'm so happy to take a break to record this podcast because my apartment is a disaster. I have so much cleaning to do. It's a hot mess right now.
I feel you.
But I'm just not going to think about it and record this podcast.
I'm so busy podcasting. The dishes have piled up. The laundry needs to be done. I need a podcast assistant that can do household chores.
Podcasting takes a lot of time out of your day.
Takes a lot of time and dedication. And we'll soon learn that the cousins also are too busy to clean their apartment.
Do they have a podcast too?
They don't have a podcast. I don't know why they're so busy. But of course, we're at Season 4, Episode 10. The title of this episode, Maid to Order. That's M-A-I-D.
Oh, I see what they did there.
See what they did? It's a pun.
I see what they did. Maid to Order.
Play with words. Wordplay.
And if you were to open the TV guide back then, you would have read about this episode. Larry puts his foot down when the maid Balky hires turns out to be everything they needed and more.
Oh, Larry's putting his foot down. This is serious.
Whoa.
I'm putting my foot down. That's Larry for you.
We have our standard cast of the guys and their lady friends, Balky, Larry, Jennifer, and Marianne. And then we have a couple of our favorite guest casts. We have Harriet Winslow, played by Jo Marie Payton France, and a brief appearance by Mr. Gorpley, played by Sam Anderson. And then we have a very special guest in this episode, the maid, who is played by Doris Roberts.
Oh, the great Doris Roberts. We'll get to her. More about her later. This episode first aired January 6, 1989. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Man, we just blew through Christmas and New Year's in a matter of 2 weeks. This TV world is fantastic.
But actually, in the real world, too, we blow through Christmas and New Year's in a matter of 2 weeks.
Yeah, before you know it, it's like, oh, it's done. It's the next year.
It's not about TV. It literally is in 2 weeks.
89 was a great year.
It was.
Perfect Strangers also streaming for free on Amazon Prime or IMDb TV. Just need a simple account, and you can watch it all. It's awesome.
With one little commercial break, it's really not much.
It's very convenient to watch and binge.
Yes.
All right, sister, let's get into Act 1.
Okay, Act 1, we start the first time. This is the first episode we've started in a long time, not at the Chronicle.
Yeah.
We start in the apartment.
Remember the apartment?
I remember the apartment. I even remember the old apartment.
Yeah, the apartment changed somehow. Magic.
So the guys are in the apartment, and the apartment is a hot mess. There is stuff all over, and Larry comes out of his bedroom, and he's wearing like a weird, like a polo shirt.
Yeah, it's like a stretchy polo short sleeve shirt with a collar, and he has
he's
a tie.
Trying to put a tie on over it.
Who puts a tie?
And it's a green shirt, and he's putting a red tie like he's going to a Christmas party or something.
Who puts a tie on a polo shirt? I've never seen this done.
Well, he explains that he hasn't had time to do the laundry, and that polo shirt is the only clean shirt he's got to wear to work, and he's talking to Balky this whole time, and Balky's at the dining table doing like he's in college now.
He's a college boy
doing his homework, but there's like all this other stuff on the table too. And he says to Balky, "Does this look okay with a tie?" And Balky looks at it and he says, "It looks pretty stylish to me." And then Larry's like, "Okay, no tie," and he takes it off.
The apartment is a mess, but it's like not that crazy.
It's just cluttered. There's just stuff out.
You spend like half an hour, you'd clean all that stuff up, no problem.
Yeah,
I understand what the problem is. Yeah. But Balky's trying to do his work, but also tell Larry that he's going to get to the laundry tonight. But then he realizes he can't because he has a big history test at college, and he's behind on the dishes. And Larry's like, well, now I don't even have time to eat breakfast. And Balky's like, you know what? That's going to work out, cousin, because there's no clean bowls for your cereal. And then he goes, actually, there's no clean spoons for your cereal either. So everything, don't worry about it. And Larry goes and sits at the table, and Balky grabs a box of cereal and goes, care for a handful of cereal? It's Colonel Kernels.
Colonel Kernels.
Oh, it's such a clever name for a box for
Colonel
cereal.
Kernels. So Balky pours
Pour it in my hand.
Pours some cereal into Larry's hand, and some of it spills out.
Oh my God,
they
it's
don't
going
care
everywhere.
The place is a mess.
Yeah, it's just making a bigger
they're just
mess.
like cereal everywhere. They're kind of always messy with cereal on this show.
That's true.
Here we get the premise. Larry explains between Balky's going to college at night and Larry is apparently doing extra work at the paper, they no longer have time to get caught up on the household chores. And Larry says, I think we should get a maid. And Balky says, cousin, I hardly think getting a young woman to milk a goat is going to solve our problem.
That's what a maid is on Meepos. A milkmaid.
Larry says, not a milkmaid. I'm talking about a maid. And he's, of course, talking about a housekeeper. But the way he explains it is someone who comes in while we're at work, cleans up, and is gone by the time we get home. And Balky says, on Meepos, we call those people thieves.
That's a solid line.
As soon as Larry said it, I knew they were going to make some, like, rob the house joke.
And then Larry does the old, well, in America, we call them maids, and we're going to get one. And Larry's like, we're just going to find someone to come in and clean up. Yeah. And then Larry eats cereal out of his hand, and then Balky grabs the milk carton and goes, milk? Pour it into my hands. Yes, just pour the milk into my hands. It's fine. I'll slurp it up.
The little opening scene that sets up the story. So then we fade into the next scene. We're still in the apartment some days later, and Balky's there, and Larry arrives home, and Balky's very excited to tell him news. But before he can tell him anything, Larry starts talking, of course, and he's frustrated. He says he's been looking for 2 days. So it's 2 days later for a maid, but he can't find anything. He says, I can't believe what they charge for housekeepers. And then Balky's trying to cut in and tell him the news, but Larry keeps cutting him off with his rant. Most of these people make more money than I do. And Balky's like, well, wait till you hear what and then Larry says, it's impossible to find a maid who will work for $35 a day.
That's surprisingly
That's 1989
affordable. Oh my God. Yeah.
Prices.
Yeah.
And Balky finally shouts out, cousin, I found a maid. And Larry's like, you found someone who's willing to work for $35 a day? And Balky says, he found someone who's willing to work every day for $35 a week.
Wow.
And he says, can I sniff out a bargain or what? That's like, super cheap.
It's like $5 a day or something.
Yeah.
You just that's crazy. Now, like, I think maids are like $35 an hour. If you want a decent maid.
At least.
You know?
Probably more than that. Yeah.
But Larry, of course, is suspicious. He's like, there's got to be a catch. You got to be crazy to work for $35 a week. And then he looks at Balky and goes, you didn't hire a crazy person, did you? There's a lot of use of this word crazy in this episode. And
that wouldn't hold up
1989.
Yeah.
I'll just remind everyone. But I mean, they're using the word
very ableist of them.
Yes, it is. But Balky goes, well, of course I didn't. Don't be ridiculous. He's like, would I give a week's grocery money to a crazy person? And Larry's like, you gave the week's grocery money to a total stranger? And then Balky goes, no, I gave this week's grocery money to a woman who I have a very, very good feeling about. And then Larry goes, oh, you had a very good feeling about her. I see. I stand corrected. He goes, you didn't give our money to a crazy person. You're the crazy person. What is the matter with you? And he's like, she's probably gone, lost all the money on the track. Just then, the door opens.
Before we get to the door, though, I think this is like funny dialogue here because we never actually find out where Balky met this woman or how he met her.
We don't. Like, was it
not explained at all?
Was it a flyer? Did he bump into her somewhere?
I don't know.
Like on a job posting board? Oh yeah, it was at a library. It is very like where, and then we'll meet who this person is. But where would Balky meet?
But
someone like
this? I thought it was weird that the writers didn't sort of like explain or provide any background there of like
he's just like I found her.
I found someone.
So
yeah, but where? How? Yeah,
I don't know.
And Larry didn't even ask.
No.
Where did you find her? Anyway, just then the door opens and this older woman, kind of like like an older aunt type with poofy hair, walks in and she's got a bag full of groceries. And
it's Doris Roberts.
It's Doris Roberts.
Well, we'll just, you may know her from Everybody Loves Raymond. She was Raymond's mom. So that's
Raymond's
one little tidbit.
Mother,
If you haven't never seen this show, or you've probably seen her. I mean, even that show is really old. It aired in the 90s, late 90s.
So she's got all these groceries. She's been to the butcher shop. And then she looks at Larry. She says, "Oh, you must be Larry. I've heard a lot about you. I've seen your bedroom. I think I can save it." And Balky helps her and takes off her coat, etc. And then he tells Larry, "This is she. This is our new housekeeper." And he introduces her as Mrs. Bailey.
Mrs. Bailey.
And then Larry tries to like intervene, and he tries to tell her that there's been a misunderstanding, and she's on to him. She cuts him off. She says, "Oh, you probably think you're dealing with a crazy person, right?" And then Larry backtracks a little. He says, "Why would I think that?" And she says, "Well, because only a crazy person would work for $35 a week." So that's exactly what Larry was thinking, and she knew it. And Larry says, "Well, that does seem logical." And she's like unpacking the groceries at this point. But then she tells us that
why is she doing this?
Yeah, she feels crazy or just sitting around an empty house doing nothing. That's like the only backstory we get about Mrs. Bailey is that somehow she has an empty house.
We don't even find out what her first name is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just Mrs. Bailey. So
she says she doesn't need the money. It's the work that makes her happy.
Aw,
and she's unpacking the whole time. And then she's like, "You got an 8-inch springform cake pan?"
Which is funny because I feel like, so they don't know. He's like, I kind of doubt it. And clearly they're confused. But I feel like nowadays everybody would know what that is from cooking shows. Yeah,
now everyone knows. Yeah, that was an interesting line because we didn't have all these baking shows back then. So a young Larry and Balky probably wouldn't know what it was. But
so Mrs. Bailey is getting to work. She's like, I got time to do the laundry. I'm going to start making dinner. She's picking up the clothes. She's like, "You boys like chocolate cake?" And they're all excited. And Balky's like, "It's Cousin Larry's favorite." So she's going to make chocolate cake. She runs over to the door. Larry attempts to help her. And she's like, no.
Laundry.
Yeah, she picks up the laundry basket. He's like, no, that's my job. And she goes, "Your job is to get the clothes dirty. And by the looks of things, you're the best," she says.
Oh, my goodness. But this is funny. Like, this whole episode is painting Larry as some slob, but he's not.
He's the anal retentive one who's always buttoned up and would have everything clean. It is kind of funny.
I don't take Larry for someone who would just have, like, dirty clothes lying around.
That is kind of weird. Maybe he's gotten a lot of extra work at the
out
paper.
Of character, yeah.
Balky would be the one who would be all earthy, if you think about it.
So anyway, Larry opens the door for her because she's carrying this thing of laundry, and she leaves to, I guess the laundry's like in the basement or something. And she's like, "I'll be back." So she exits, and then Balky's feeling super proud of himself because he has found them a rather incredible maid. And then he looks at Larry and says, "Is there anything you'd like to say to me?" He's like waiting for a compliment. And Larry says, "Yes. What the hell is an 8-inch springform cake pan?"
See, nowadays I think people would know what it's a round thing, right? It's keep the cake shape.
It's like for a cheesecake, and you take the side off.
But it was such a crazy item back in 1989.
I guess it was brand new. We should Google when was the springform cake pan invented.
I'm sure it's been around for a long time, and you can just get it at Target now.
Yeah.
Anyways, we transition to the next scene, and we're finally at the Chronicle at work.
Oh, and yay.
It's raining outside. You can tell by the really bad superimposed rain over a sunny shot of the outside where there's clearly
rain is at a perfect angle.
There's no water hitting the ground. The ground is clearly not wet, but it's raining. You'll see why. And Larry walks in from the archives, and Harriet sees him and gives him a compliment. She's like, "Look at you. I haven't seen you this wrinkle-free in ages."
Oh, wow.
He's looking sharp, feeling good. She's like, "That new maid must really be something." And by the sounds of it, Larry is enjoying having a maid, right?
Because Larry says, "Oh, she is something." And then he tells Harriet that she's there early before they get up. She has a big breakfast waiting and dinner waiting when they get home from work, and she does the laundry and the dishes and the shopping. And she said she even turns down the beds and has a little mint on the pillow.
Mint.
And Harriet's like, Sounds like you died and went to a Holiday Inn.
And then Larry's like, yeah, and I should be happy. And Harry's like, so what's the problem? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, I got somebody who waits on me hand and foot, and it's starting to get on my nerves.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, dear. What?
He doesn't like it. So then Balky comes out of the back, like Gorpley's office area, and he's so excited, and he tells them, you're never going to believe this. Mr. Gorpley's in a good mood.
What?
And Larry's like, what? You're kidding. And Balky says, he let me play darts with him. I got to hold the board.
I just picture Gorpley throwing darts at Balky, and it's just hitting him everywhere. That's pretty funny.
Mr. Gorpley's being nice to him.
He's got a note pinned to his shirt. You notice when he comes out.
And Harriet's like, what's on your shirt, baby? And apparently it's a note that Mrs. Bailey had pinned to him to remind him to take his vitamins.
Oh, vitamins. That's helpful.
Take his vitamins.
Sure.
And he's like so excited about it because he's like, no, I'll never forget. And Cousin Larry, and he looks at Cousin Larry, and there's no note. He's looking around and he said, you took your note off? And Larry's like, I think I can remember to floss. So here we're seeing like that Larry's a little skeptical, but Balky's like so in love with Mrs. Bailey because he says, Mrs. Bailey says plaque is the leading cause of tooth decay and gingivitis. Mrs. Bailey is so smart. I always thought that gingivitis was Fred Astaire's dancing partner.
That's pretty funny. Funny joke.
Of course, he means Ginger Rogers.
Ginger Rogers. Gingivitis.
Not gingivitis. But we also see the dynamic here that Balky is like super into Mrs. Bailey.
Well,
and Larry's like, it's a little much.
And this is kind of, it continues to the episode, and it's very endearing because just then Mrs. Bailey comes in from the parking garage holding 2 pairs of boots, and Balky's like, Mrs. Bailey, and he runs over like a little kid, gives her a hug. It's like when a little boy sees his favorite aunt or his grandma, and he runs over. And Mrs. Bailey shows up at their job. It's a little odd, I suppose.
Yeah.
But she was concerned. They left without taking their galoshes.
Galoshes. Now, we might have to explain what a galoshes
anybody say galoshes anymore? This is such a funny word.
These rubber boots that you wear in the rain to
that
keep
went
your
over
feet
your
from getting
shoes. Right?
Yeah, I guess they went over your shoes.
You didn't take your shoes off.
And
you put them
Balky's
over.
galoshes have like Meposian,
of course,
flair on them.
So, yeah, galoshes is such a funny word also. She's like,
galoshes.
It's bad enough you're going to ruin your shoes. You want to ruin your health, too? And Balky's like, no, I would never want to do anything like that.
The idea was like, if you get your feet wet, you'll get
sick, which is like an old wives' tale. But is that true? Does that happen? Like, if you go out with your hair's a little wet after a shower and maybe it's cold or it's raining, will you get pneumonia and die?
No.
Just like there isn't quicksand everywhere waiting to trap you. These are all old wives' tales.
And then Balky's like, oh, thank you. And he tells her, I'm so sorry you had to come all the way down here. You shouldn't have come down here. And Larry's like, yeah, really, you shouldn't have come down here.
You really shouldn't have.
And then Mr. Gorpley enters the scene.
Bartogamus!
Yeah, and he yells, Bartogamus! And he just barks a bunch of orders at Balky. Get these memos out to everyone in circulation. See to it that all these sacks are sorted. And Balky's like, okay. And he says, remember to get all your pickups done early today. He says, okay. And then he waits for Gorpley to add anything. He doesn't. Gorpley just goes, go.
Oh.
And Balky's like, okay.
Oh, my God.
And then Mrs. Bailey doesn't like how Mr. Gorpley is talking to Balky.
Trying to set someone straight, Mrs. Bailey. And she goes up to him. She goes up to Gorpley. This is actually pretty great. She goes, pardon me, young man. And she's sweet as can be, right?
Yeah.
She's like, there's a nicer way to ask for things, and I didn't once hear you use the magic word. And Gorpley goes, excuse me. And she goes, no.
Looking at her like, who are you?
But she's like, no, not excuse me. Please. And you should smile more. And she squishes his face. And then she grabs Balky and brings him over. He goes, come over here. And then she just goes, okay, say you're sorry to Mr. Gorpley and points at Balky.
Oh, my gosh.
Gorpley, oh, my God. Mrs. Bailey defeats Gorpley. Gorpley is in shock. He stares at Balky. And then, like, kind of cracking up, he goes, I'm sorry. And then he has this look on his face like he's surprised himself that he said, I'm sorry. And he walks away, and then he turns and looks back as if to say, what just happened here?
Yeah.
And then he leaves and goes back. And, oh, my God, Larry's mouth is wide open. Everyone's in shock because Mrs. Bailey tamed Gorpley in like 30 seconds. And she goes to Balky, is he always like that? And Balky's like, no. Sometimes he wear a plaid, he said. But man, the power of Mrs. Bailey even got Gorpley. That was fantastic.
And there's more. Mrs. Bailey then says, oh, I almost forgot. She tried the recipe Balky told her about for pig snout puffs.
Oh,
and she brought some. And she pulls this out of a small paper bag. And Balky's super excited and tastes one. And she says, be honest, I've never worked with snout before. And Balky tries it. And he says, just like Mama used to make. And then he's like, Mrs. Bailey, let's go offer these to my friend Jimmy, the security guard. And Mrs. Bailey says, oh, that'll be fun. And the two of them, Balky and Mrs. Bailey, head out and they leave the room. And as they're leaving, she turns back and she says, Larry, what did I tell you about your posture? And Larry like stands up straight.
He was slouching.
And she goes, that's better. And then she leaves with Balky. Balky's like, Jimmy. And Harriet then, after they leave, Harriet says to Larry, you've got a problem, baby. You didn't hire a maid, you hired a mother.
Yep, we leave it to Harriet to put it succinctly.
That is what Larry has been thinking this whole time and worried about. And so we see a worried look on Larry's face, and we fade out to end Act 1.
Yeah, it's a little much. It's a little, she's everywhere. I get it. But again, the glee happiness that Balky gets every time he sees her. He just loves Mrs. Bailey. It's so...
Mrs. Bailey. She's like, Santa! Santa!
Listener, let us know what you think of Mrs. Bailey so far. You can join the conversation. We have a lovely Facebook group for this very podcast. There's a link in the show notes. You can meet other fans of Perfect Strangers, and I post a thread on every episode a few weeks ahead of recording, so you can leave your conversations as you watch it on IMDb TV and leave your observations.
Yes.
And a new group member, John Corbett, has introduced himself to us. I love meeting John. He says, hi, I'm Ron and Sophia. I've been a huge Perfect Strangers fan since it debuted in the spring of 1986. Just like us, really, right?
Just like us.
He goes, I can't believe I didn't hear about your podcast until the past few days. Great job. Now I am so happy. He leaves the comment.
Yes.
John, pleasure to meet you. Welcome. Thanks for finding us. You found your tribe. You found your people. This is what great about podcasting. People will find you. And hope to read more comments from you, John Corbett.
All right. Act 2. We are back at the apartment. It's like evening time. And the door opens and in walk Balky and Marianne and Jennifer and Larry. They've all been out on some kind of fun
dressed up
double date. They're all dressed up.
And we find out they went to a George Michael concert.
1989. I guess George Michael was super relevant.
Oh, yeah, he's huge. Post-Wham. It's post-Wham George Michael.
Yeah.
But yeah, Marianne's like, she loves George Michael. She says, I think it's so sexy when someone has two first names.
Oh my God. So
George and Michael.
And then Jennifer tells us that when he sang Careless Whisper, she melted. And she said, he just makes me feel so romantic.
That is a romantic song.
That's the cue for Larry. Larry's like, tonight's the night. So he tells the girls to select some music in the, what do they have? There's like a old sound system there.
It's a turntable. It's a record. They're picking out records to put on a record
sustain
to play.
The mood. He says, select some music to sustain the mood. And he pulls Balky aside to... obviously a private conversation on the other side of the room where nobody can hear them. And so they go to the kitchen and then Larry tells Balky, I think this could be the greatest night of my life.
Amazing, perfect Larry hyperbole for the situation.
Yeah. Larry's like, this is it.
This is going to be the greatest night of my life. I will give him credit, though, for taking the girls to a George Michael concert. Like, that's a good move right away.
How do you know if it was his idea? It could have been their idea.
That's a good point.
Don't give him the credit yet.
Okay, I can't give him the credit. Because I was like, if you thought of this, well done. Because it's George Michael. It's what he does.
I bet in 1989 it was the ladies who wanted to go to George Michael and drag the men along.
Yeah, that's true. Or, if he noticed that they liked George Michael and noticed that the concert was happening, that would have been smart. But it was probably not too smart of an idea. He probably just fell into some free tickets from the Chronicle And it just worked out. Anyway,
and here I think there was a lost opportunity for, maybe they had it and cut it, but like when Marianne says, I think it's so sexy when someone has two first names, I could totally see Balky saying, oh yeah, on Mypos we have like Stavros something, like whatever.
Stavros.
two first Myposian
She gets
names.
all the women.
Yeah.
Sheep herder Stavros.
As a singer, there's so much you could do right there. But okay.
So Larry has pulled Balky aside. This is going to be the greatest night of my life. All right? He's like, he's got a plan. He tells Balky, when we go back in the living room, I'll dim the lights and ask Jennifer to dance. And then when I feel the time is right, I'll do this. And he jerks his head back into the left.
This side.
And Balky's like, why would anybody do this? And jerks his head off.
This was so random and funny, though.
And then
this is the only bit of physical comedy.
Yeah, there's not a lot of physical comedy. There's a little more coming up. But Larry goes, because when I do this, and he jerks his head again, third time, he goes, that means you tell Marianne that you want to go upstairs and see her great cities of the world placemat collection. Okay, weird collection to have.
Yeah.
First of all. But Balky's like, I already seen it. And then he goes, I was quite disappointed in Barcelona. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And then Larry's like, trust me, Balky, Barcelona is much prettier.
Whoa.
This time of the year.
Okay.
I don't think Balky's quite getting
Balky's not getting it.
He's trying, yes.
So then the girls, play some sort of romantic
take a vinyl record out of a cardboard sleeve, and they have to place it on this round thing and drop a needle on it so it spins, so the grooves produce a vibration that comes out as music. Isn't that crazy?
And it's kind of like some romantic slow dance music, and then Larry goes to the front door and like turns off the lights, but I think he like turns them all off.
Yeah,
so
no,
they're
he
like
said he was
literally
gonna dim
in the dark
lights.
room.
Yes. He switched all the lights off, so
he
it's
didn't
like TV
dim
darkness,
anything. He just
right?
turned it all off.
If this was in real life, it would be pitch black, which is it's a little too dark, Larry.
Yeah. I don't know. That was weird to me. I'm like, why would you dance in the dark? Anyway, then he asks Jennifer to dance, and Jennifer agrees, and she's actually kind of into it for once.
Oh, man.
So they're kind of like slow dancing, and then Balky asks Marianne if he would like to dance, and then they start dancing. And so they're both like two couples slow dancing right next to each other in the living room
This
in the dark.
This bit is great.
Balky's like kind of trying to look at Larry for the signal, but Marianne like puts his head down on her shoulder, so he can't really see anything.
He's not
like,
paying attention for the signal anymore.
Shoulder.
Yeah.
And Larry looks at him. He's like making that head jerk motion, but Balky's not looking because his head is like in her shoulder. And so then there's a little bit more physical comedy because Larry reaches over and like slaps Balky on the arm hard a few times.
Yeah.
And then Balky lifts his head and looks at Marianne, and he goes, ooh.
And Marianne clearly is confused, right? The first
like,
time,
what?
she's like, what happened?
Your head.
And then they're still dancing. And Larry, this time, he's like, oh, do I get his attention? He starts snapping his fingers. He's like, snap, snap, snap. And then instead of Balky getting up, Balky puts on his two hands and starts snapping his fingers
to the beat,
of the music. And again, Marianne is like, what is happening? And finally, this is so great. Larry, they're both turned, and with his back, they're kind of turned the same way. And Larry just reaches up and smacks the back of Balky's head really hard. At this point, and then Balky finally looks at Marianne and just goes, wow. What does he think? What does Balky think is happening also?
Marianne's like beating him in a flirty way, I guess.
It's getting a little rough and he's enjoying it. I was very alarmed at this.
And so he's definitely not getting the hint. But then Jennifer pipes in and she goes, Marianne, why don't you take Balky upstairs and show him your great cities of the world placemat collection?
And Larry's face is amazing because he's like,
whoa,
wait a minute,
you had the same
plan.
idea. Yeah.
That's what I said. And it's so funny that she suggests the same exact thing. And Marianne's like, okay. And they start to leave for the front door.
And then Jennifer and Larry lean in. They're about to kiss.
God.
We've never seen this before.
This whole time, they're really canoodling. They're very close.
Yeah,
and
it's the first time I've seen Jennifer show any interest
It's
in
George
Larry.
Michael. I don't think Larry had anything to do with this. It's George Michael got her all hot and bothered.
Yes,
and
that's true.
And Larry is just there. It's
true.
basically what's going on.
But it is the first time her character is like shown.
Oh my God, this is the most that she's ever shown
how
interest.
I always say,
yes.
I don't even believe she's into him. Okay, so but before they can finish the kiss and before Balky and Marianne reach the door opens and in walks Mrs. Bailey.
No!
And she turns on the light and she's got a laundry basket full of clothes. She's like, "Oh, you're home." And then Balky, of course, gets super excited. He's like, "Mrs. Bailey! Mrs. Bailey!"
He's so
he opens
happy
his
to
arms
see her.
to hug her.
Yeah.
And Larry like kind of rolls his eyes and turns off the stereo. And then Balky's super excited. He wants Mrs. Bailey to meet their friends. He introduces Marianne and Jennifer. And then he introduces them. He says, "This is Mrs. Bailey, our new housekeeper." And Larry's just like, "What the heck? It's nighttime. We're home from a date. Like,
we're working on a mood."
And he says, "What, Mrs. Bailey, what are you doing here?" And she says, "I work here." And then she looks at Jennifer and says, "Oh, honey, this one's crazy about you. How embarrassing for Larry."
It's late, too.
Yeah,
I think he mentions later
like,
it's like midnight.
It's like after a George Michael concert.
Yeah, what is
like
she doing?
At least midnight.
Yeah.
So Larry tells Mrs. Bailey, "I think you've done enough work for one day. Why don't you take the rest of the evening off?"
Trying to get rid of her, of course.
And she's like, "Oh, that's so sweet of you, but if you don't want me to fold the clothes, why don't I mix up a batch of chocolate chip cookies and then I can get to know your friends better?"
She wants to have an evening.
Yeah, she
midnight,
just like invites
just
herself
sit around
in.
and talk to them.
And she goes to the kitchen. Balky, of course, is like, "Chocolate chip cookies! What a great idea!"
I mean, it does sound delicious.
And Larry's kind of like hinting. He's like, "I think it's kind of late for all of this." And Jennifer agrees. She's like, "Yeah, it is late." And they start to. She's like, "We should be going." And Larry's like, "No. Larry's like, my greatest night ever. Why are you leaving?" And they of course have to get up early in the morning for work and stuff. And then she also is like, "And we've kind of lost the mood from the music and the slow dancing, I guess."
Yeah. There was a mood. They were about to make out.
Yeah, they were, but they didn't quite make it. And then Larry's like, "No, we haven't lost the mood. We'll turn the lights back off. We'll send her off. We'll turn the lights back off, down. We'll put the music back up." He's like, "I'll find the mood if it kills me." And Jennifer's like, "No, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for blah, blah." And they leave. And Larry's still trying to get them, but. And as they're leaving, Marianne's like, "I don't understand. Is anyone going to come and look at my placemats or what?"
She's very proud of her placemat collection.
She also didn't get what that was supposed
no, but
to mean.
it seemed like she was going to take Balky up to actually look at the placemats. Is that what's going on here?
Nothing else. Just looking at placemats.
And they were going to look at placemats. And then Mrs. Bailey's like, "Oh, your date's left." She's like, "I hope I didn't ruin the evening." And Balky has a great line. He goes, "Oh, no, you didn't ruin anything. They always leave around this time." And they can never close the deal, these two. They're trying.
Oh, no. And he says, "Anyway, we can still have those chocolate chip cookies." And Miss Bailey like, "Okay, let me just put this laundry away and I'll mix up a batch." And she takes the laundry basket into Larry's room. And when she's out of the scene, out of the living room, Larry says to Balky, "We have to talk about Mrs. Bailey.
They need to have a serious talk."
Yeah. He says, "We have to talk about Mrs. Bailey." And Balky's like, "Yes, it's midnight and she's here baking chocolate chip cookies. We should give her a raise."
But sweet
and
innocent
Larry's
Balky.
like, "That's not what I mean." And he says, "I like Mrs. Bailey as much as anybody, but it's like living with my mother." And Balky goes, "I know, it gets better and better." Balky's so excited about living with his mother, or like a mother-like figure. And then Larry tries again, and he's like, "She's driving me crazy." And Balky, of course, defends her and says she's a wonderful woman, a terrific housekeeper. She's everything we wanted and more. And this is a nice line. Larry's like, "It's the more that's driving me crazy." And basically he says like, she's around too much and she's too mother, like she's always there when he wants to be alone. She's always telling him to wash his hands before dinner. And also she ruined what could have been the most wonderful night of his life. And so basically the bottom line is that Larry wanted someone who would clean up a little, not someone who would tuck him in every night. And he tells Balky, "I'm going to have to fire her."
Well, and you notice in the background, as he's saying this, Mr. Bailey walks out of Larry's room and is overhearing this part of, "I'm going to have to fire Mrs. Bailey."
Uh-oh.
And Balky's like, "You could kiss that notion goodbye. She likes taking care of us. I like being taken care of. It's 2 against 1. She stays. So he's fighting for her.
And before Larry can argue back, Mrs. Bailey steps in from the background and says,
Awkward.
No, I should go.
Oh, no, she heard all of this.
And Larry immediately feels very badly and ashamed, and he tries to explain to her, oh, no, Mrs. Bailey, I didn't mean. And she cuts him off and says, no, that's all right. And then Balky, too, is like, he didn't mean it. And they're trying to apologize and get her to stay. And she says, no need for apologies. It's just a situation that didn't work out. And she very humbly says, I'm very pleased to have met you both, and I'm sure you'll find someone more suitable. And she leaves, and the whole time she's leaving, Balky's like trying to beg her to stay. But she leaves, and she closes the door. Then Balky is pissed, and he turns to Larry. And Larry tries to explain his reasoning, but Balky just walks away into his bedroom and closes the door.
Slams his door while he's talking. Yeah, he just freezes him out. And the audience is like, oh.
Yeah, they don't fight like this very often.
No, and the way Doris Roberts' performance was so good. She just handles it very reasonably, but you could tell
she handles it like Chris Rock at the Oscars.
Yeah, she handled it. She took it like a slap from Will Smith. She did, and just kept on going, and it didn't shake her. And you could tell in her head, just like him. He's like, "What just happened?
It hurt.
I'm stunned, but I'm gonna have to." And now we're here to give out documentary Oscar. And she continues. She took it like a Chris Rock. Anyways, we cut to what I assume is some days later, and the apartment's clean. Larry's vacuuming. The apartment is clean. And Balky comes in from college with some school books, and Larry's trying to talk to him, trying to tell him something. And all Balky does, he goes straight to the kitchen. He opens the fridge, he grabs some food, and then he walks right past Larry.
And the whole time, Larry's asking him, how was school? How was class? Hey.
He's like, I want to tell you something. I have some news.
Yeah.
And Balky just walks right by and closes the door right on his face.
Cold shoulders.
It's been 3 days, Larry says.
3 days of cold shoulder from Balky.
Yeah, he's like, when are you how long are you going to keep this going? And Balky opens the door and goes, forever or until you hire Mrs. Bailey back, and then slams the door. He goes, did you hire her back? And Larry's like, I'm not going to hire her back. And then he closes the door again. Right. And then there's a knock at the front door.
Yes. And it's Mrs. Bailey.
It's Mrs. Bailey.
And she has a chocolate cake with her under like a cake cover.
You can't show up empty-handed.
And Larry welcomes her in, and she comes in. She says hello, and she sits down on the couch, and she says, I brought this cake for Larry, for you and Balky. And he says, oh, thank you. She looks around the apartment and sees that it's clean. She says, oh, my goodness, 3 days and this place hasn't fallen apart. I'm proud of you.
Aww.
And Larry says, thank you. And then Balky hears her voice and comes out of the bedroom. And again, he's like, Mrs. Bailey, you came back. And he hugs her. And he's so excited. He's like, she came back. And she didn't really come back. Because she says she still can't believe what the boys did for her. And she just had to come back and tell them thank you. And Balky's confused at this point. He says, thank us for what? And Larry cuts him off, talks over him. He says, we were glad to do it. And we find out that Balky and Larry, or Larry in both of their names, found a sorority at Northwestern that needed a house mother and knew that Mrs. Bailey would be perfect for the job. And so that's where she's working now.
Oh, at least they used the actual Chicago area college too, which is nice.
So Larry found her a job being a mother for a sorority house. And Mrs. Bailey says, you're so right. I've never enjoyed a job more. And then Balky's a little hurt by this. Yeah. He says, didn't you enjoy working for us? She said, of course she did. But Larry was right. It's not like it was too much for them. And Balky says, we need you. And she said, no, you don't. You can take care of yourself. But these college kids, they really need me.
College kids were a mess back then too. Period.
Yeah.
Still.
So she gets up to go and says, come and visit. And they hug. And she says, enjoy the cake. Come and visit. And Balky says, we will do. And then she stops in the doorway. And before she leaves, she has one parting piece of motherly advice. She says, one more thing. Try to make it a habit to keep the toilet seat down. You'll thank me when you're married.
Solid tip. Solid tip from Mrs. Bailey.
She walks out and the door is closed. And Balky's like super confused, but he's like putting the pieces together at this point. And he says, well, I'll be snookered. And he realizes that Larry went out and found Mrs. Bailey a job that makes her happy, that fits her better than working for them.
And then this is great because this is now Larry gets to do something he doesn't get a chance to do often in their relationship. Suddenly, because he's been freezing him out, right? Suddenly Larry looks around the room. He's like, oh, Balky, was that you? I didn't recognize your voice. It's been so long since I heard it. And then he just has this smug look on his face as he slowly walks over
Bronson
to
Pinchot
the
is
couch.
like laughing throughout this whole scene. He's not even trying to hide it. He's like, and he apologizes. Balky apologizes to Larry. And he says, I feel awful. You know, for 3 days I've done nothing but sit in my bedroom and be angry at you. And Larry's like, oh, is that where you were? I was so worried. I thought you moved out.
I thought you moved out.
And then Balky's like, you're not going to make this easy, are you?
See, usually Larry is saying that to Balky, and now it's been flipped. And Larry says, no, I don't get many opportunities like this. You don't,
and he
Larry.
sits back to wait for more apology from Balky. So Balky says that he apologizes. He can't believe that he was having bad thoughts about how selfish Larry was when Larry was out giving of himself. And he says, you know, you are a saint. And Larry's like feeling quite proud.
Like,
but then Balky goes into this Meposian like over humbleness. And he's like, I'm humbled in your presence. I would be honored to be the dirt on your shoes. And he's like lowering himself physically toward
Marklin
Larry's
Baker's
feet.
facial expressions in this are so funny because as he goes on, he gets more and more uncomfortable.
Yeah. And he goes on. He says, no, dirt is too honorable for me. And then he gets on his knees. He says, I would be honored to be the mildew on your shower curtain. And he's like getting really low to the ground, but Larry grabs him by the back of the shirt, pulls him back up to sit on the couch. He's like, that's enough.
Oh, his body language,
good.
how uncomfortable Larry got when he kept going. It was so funny. Great switch from, I am a saint to, oh my God, stop. Just stop.
Yeah. And somewhere in here, the lesson time music started. So the lesson is basically Balky apologizing. And for thinking badly of Cousin Larry, which is like a weird lesson here. I think they could have been like a more intense lesson, but
well, Larry doesn't often do something good, so it caught him off guard.
So Larry forgives him and he's like, let's have some of this chocolate cake. And they pick up the cake and Larry says, you want real plates or paper? And Balky's like, well, whose turn is it to do the dishes? And Larry says, yours. And Balky says, paper. And that's the final joke. And roll credits.
Listener, check out our Dance of Joy TeePublic shop. You can get some cool swag there. T-shirts, cell phone cases, mugs with the Dance of Joy logo. Lots of colors and styles. Hoodies, tank tops to choose from. It's very fun and brightly colored. And you will be the talk of the town with a very niche podcast shirt that nobody knows what it is. And then you get to explain it.
Yeah. So let's talk about this episode. Have you ever hired a housekeeper or maid?
No. We thought about it.
Did you ever do it like when you were a young man in your 20s?
No,
like
God, I wouldn't want anybody coming in cleaning up my apartment in my 20s. There'd be all sorts of illicit things you'd have to hide.
You're supposed to have a nasty apartment in your 20s.
No. Like, I gotta put all this stuff. Like, I would be the thing where I'd want to pre-clean before the person comes to clean. Like, I can't. Yeah. No, this is my underwear. You're not gonna. It's kind of a weird thing, but I don't know. It's very 80s. I mean, they have now maybe we'll talk to PS today, like Molly maids and whatever.
Yeah.
Which is like a service, and they come in and they clean up and steal your things and leave.
Yes.
But yeah, this was a weird episode. Like, it was very sweet. I appreciate it.
Sweet, but we don't have a lot of the classic lines.
We don't have physical comedy.
We don't have physical comedy. We don't have I thought it was a strange storyline.
It's a weird premise to go with. Yes.
Yeah.
But you know what saves this episode is the late great Doris Roberts. She did pass away in 2016. Doris Roberts, now, this is crazy. She had an acting career from 1951 to 2016. She had steady work. That whole time.
She was in her 60s
in this episode.
during this episode.
She was in her 60s.
That's wild. She looked great.
She looks great. She actually got an Emmy nomination for this performance.
Oh, wow.
Didn't win, but less than 10 years later, in the late 90s, when Everybody Loves Raymond, she's cast as Raymond's mom. She wins
in her 70s.
In her 70s and 80s. She wins 4 Emmys for Ray Barrone's mother on Everybody Loves Raymond. And she was also on Full House as Danny's mother in one episode.
Look at that.
But Doris Roberts is the quintessential, like, loving, middle-aged person that you would cast. She's great. Her timing is great. I wish we could find out what Mrs. Bailey's first name was, but we
don't know
matter.
anything or her backstory or why she's so alone.
And also a rare instance of Larry doing the right thing and not having a plan that puts everyone's life in danger.
Yes.
Which is what usually happens. But a weird episode.
For me, the story lost a little bit because I think I just fixated in the beginning on, like, where did he even meet Mrs. Bailey? And, like, to not have that answered just felt like it was lacking something.
I felt like she's like this. Maybe she has a lot of money and her husband's rich.
Where did
and
he
she's
find
just
her and how did he come to know
retired.
that she would work for so cheap? Yeah. I just needed that bit of explainer in the story because it just seemed... It would have made it a little more real.
And like the result of the conflict is kind of like, it's just like not fully baked. Like it wasn't a right fit, right?
It's a very superficial story. Yeah.
It was very weird. Let's find out what the listeners thought of this episode, sister.
Okay. Cousin Pam Hitchcock writes, this was a pretty forgettable episode. No physical comedy, lackluster dialogue. The best part was the wonderful Doris Roberts, who went on to receive awards for Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yeah.
Balky was really infantile in this episode, probably missing Mama.
Oh, Mama. Balky?
Jennifer actually seemed to be into Larry, exclamation marks.
Yeah.
They always leave around this time. She also
Great
enjoyed
line.
that line. So true. And Larry had a plan that worked, that was sweet and unselfish. Yes, very rare occurrence. Pretty much in tune with our thoughts.
Cousin Lauren says, I love how all of a sudden the guys had no time to clean, do laundry, or dishes. They also suddenly have enough money to afford a maid / housekeeper. And then she says, I love Doris Roberts, but couldn't she maybe have been Larry's aunt? That would have at least been something. Like you were saying, how'd they find her? That's a better connection.
Where did they find her? Yeah.
Like, I know my aunt needs work, but now she's turned into my mother. And Cousin Lauren also says, not a favorite, alas. Seems to be the case with everybody.
Okay, so 2 people. Cousin John Adama, this episode is a little more sweet than it is funny, but there are 2 elements that really elevated it. The ending was plausible, touching, and had Larry acting with someone else in mind. The second was Doris Roberts, who made the role very sweet and sympathetic rather than naggy or shrill.
Yeah.
For my money, this is not an entry-level episode. It isn't going to entice any newcomers. P.S. While a touch light on laughs, in my opinion, the dancing bit had me guffawing like a madman.
I love that he used the word guffaw.
Guffawing.
We need to bring that back. More people should use the word guffaw.
Guffawing. Yeah, that's like a hearty laugh.
It's a very descriptive word. Yeah. And the dancing, that little dancing bit was probably the funniest physical comedy bit in there. But I love when he smacks him on the back of the head. It's so funny. And he just goes, like, wow. Okay, Balky. We did get one. Don't be ridiculous.
Of course I have. Don't be ridiculous.
And we have Dimitri back in the episode.
Yeah.
Dimitri's on the bookshelf with a mess in front of him.
In the first half, there's a mess of things. And then in the second half, it's all cleaned.
It's all cleaned up.
Mrs. Bailey took care of Dimitri. She also,
Good for Dimitri. Now we are at the segment of our show that we call Perfect Strangers Today, or PS Today, in which we discuss if we were to redo this story today in 2022, how would we do things different with this episode? Would it still hold up? What advancements would we make to it? What are your thoughts?
I think largely the concept of, you hire a housekeeper for cheap and she turns into like an overbearing parent type. Like you could still write that same premise and update it.
Well, that premise works for 2 characters who are like young men in their 20s.
Right.
Yeah.
But I would put maybe how he found her would have been.
I just think it would have added something and made the story a little more real for me.
Like maybe Balky, there's an app, and Balky's on the wrong app.
Or maybe
and
they
he
go to
hired,
Molly Maids or yeah.
Or maybe instead of Molly Maids, he downloads rentamother.com and he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And it's a big misunderstanding. And she's like, I thought you
that
wanted
would
to
be
a
funny.
mother.
That would be funny. Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I used the wrong app.
Yeah,
but
that's a good fun.
I mean, other than that, it's just that, record players, now he would be like, Alexa, dim the lights.
Yeah.
Alexa, play
and
George Michael.
Maybe the mom app and the maid app have similar names, but just slight difference, and he confuses them that way.
You could do that. George, they would go to not a George, maybe an Usher concert.
John Legend.
John Legend is the new George Michael.
John Legend concert.
Careless Whisper is a great song.
Yeah.
But largely, I don't know. I don't think you would change much. Like her showing up at your job is funny and weird. Still,
But people don't really wear galoshes.
Galoshes,
anymore.
yes, she would.
So it would have to be some other reason she showed up.
You guys left your iPads
forgot
at
their
home.
Lunch. They forgot their lunches or their Apple Watches. Yeah. Yeah, or iPads or earbuds. You left your earbuds at home.
But yeah,
Earbuds.
so I mean, even though it was a weird,
It'll hold up. It was just a strange. It needed a little more depth.
Not a favorite episode, but it would still hold up. All right, well, listener, stay tuned. Join us next week. Balky's going to join a biker gang.
What?
Yeah, kind of crazy.
Where is Mrs. Bailey?
They definitely need Miss Bailey to remind him.
Yeah.
You wear your helmet, Balky.
Don't
always
join a
wear
biker
leather.
gang.
Don't join a biker gang. Motorcycles are very dangerous. Maybe Mrs. Bailey pop up. Probably not.
Well, I'm looking forward to that next week. In the meantime, listeners, you can support the show if you feel so inclined by buying us a virtual coffee. Every little bit helps us keep this show going. All the money that gets sent to us goes straight back into production costs of this podcast. And we do it because we love spreading the joy of perfect strangers. If you would love to support us, you can go on our website, danceofjoypod.com/support. And there you can click a button to buy us a virtual coffee.
Or you can leave us a review on, your Spotify's, your Apple Podcasts, or you can get in touch, send us an email. Our email is danceofjoypod@gmail.com. Everything is on our website, danceofjoypod.com. All the links are there to our social media accounts. Join the Facebook group, the link to the group. But what is the most important thing the listeners should do, sister?
Always clean your house before the housekeeper comes.
You got to
over.
pre-clean before the real clean happens because you don't want to let the housekeeper know how much of a slob you really are.
They're going to talk. They're going to talk about
yeah. When
you
after
behind
she's
your
done,
back.
you're like, man, this house I went to, you wouldn't believe.
Yes.
The filth. That's important, but also what's important, share the show with a friend, a family member, share it
a
with
stranger, a housekeeper.
Yes, share it with your housekeeper if you have one. They might appreciate it. We appreciate housekeepers. I'm not demeaning how it's a very important job.
Your dates to the George Michael concert.
Yeah, yes, share it with concert goers that you meet in public.
Share this show. It would help us out a lot. We love you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening, and now we are so happy.
Now we are so happy we do the dance of joy.
Hey, 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 hey.